Coming up next on Horsepower Heritage.
You got to figure that as soon as Harley Davidson made a motorcycle and Indian made a motorcycle, two guys hopped on those bikes and they went racing, and that's when flat track was born. The best way I can describe the sport, if you were to boil it down, would be Harley Davidson's racing on horse tracks. If you take a motorcycle on dirt and you want to navigate it around a horse track, you've got to find a way to get around that corner, sliding the entire way.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick, and greetings to all of you listening from places like Felton, Delaware, Charlotte, North Carolina, Rancho Cucamonga, California, Innisfil, Ontario, Canada, Wrexham, Wales, and Christchurch, New Zealand. Thanks for spending some time with me. And I hear from listeners all the time who tell me one of their favorite places to listen to the show is when they're tinkering out in the garage or they're detailing their car, which is exactly where I do a lot of my podcast listening. And it really makes the time fly, and then pretty soon you're getting called into dinner and you've got tools all over the place and you're greasy and you realize your back hurts and it's time for a cocktail or whatever. But anyway, I'm really humbled knowing how much you guys enjoy the show. So don't forget to share it with your friends, leave me a review and a 5-star rating if you can, and let's keep the show growing together. All right, well, I like to talk about motorcycles, and today we're going to be looking at the sport of flat track racing, which is raw and in your face, and it's all about muscling these machines around a dirt oval in a battle for fractions of a second. And my guest is Gene Crouch from the American Flat Track Racing Series, and if you aren't familiar with this particular flavor of motorsport, you're about to get the full introduction from the man at the top. And that's coming up right after this. Hey everybody, Maurice Merrick here, and I want to tell you what's new at Model Citizen Diecast. First, there's the Porsche 718 Boxster and Cayman in 1/43rd scale, perfect size for your desktop or your bookshelf. Or how about a Shelby GT350R prototype or a Volvo 850 Turbo Wagon, both in big 1/18th scale. And my listeners get 10% off when you use the code HERITAGE at checkout. Limitations apply. Just go to modelcitizendiecast.com and see what's new. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's Model Citizen Diecast. Because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Gene Crouch from American Flat Track Racing. Hey, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Maurice. We appreciate the opportunity to be on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to have you on because flat track racing it's so visceral, it's so athletic, and we're going to get into all of it. But yeah, the season's kicking off March 10th, right, in Florida.
Yep, it's the 69th season for America's original extreme sport. It's kicking off March 10th and 11th during Daytona's Bike Week festivities at Volusia Speedway in Barberville.
That is going to be a party.
It's going to be a party. Doubleheader, Thursday night, Friday night. Great opportunity for the Bike Week crowd to hop on the Harley and ride out to the track.
Fantastic. Well, we're gonna get into all of it, but let's talk a little bit about your relationship with American Flat Track. And this is a long series from March to October. You guys are on the road to the championship, but tell us about your background.
I started my career in motorsports in 2005 in sports cars. And in 2006, the company started a motorcycle road racing championship. And having grown up on two wheels, racing on two wheels, but without a motor, I grew up racing BMX, and I gravitated immediately to the motorcycle series. And so I spent the first couple years of my career in motorcycling with Moto ST, which was, I didn't know it at the time, but I was surrounded by legends from motorcycling. Gary Nixon, Jay Springsteen, Bill Werner. Just names that now I look back and I go, man, I can't believe I was spending that much time with those guys, with the legends of the sport. That then turned into Daytona Motorsports Group. We took over the rights to professional motorcycle racing for North America in 2009, and we have been growing ever since.
By the way, one of your premier events is the Sacramento Mile, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a long-running event, very successful event. And, there's a ton of history with flat track racing in California. The Agajanians promoted flat track at Ascot Park for many years. And the Sacramento Mile is a great race up in NorCal, but we would love to get back to SoCal and have a race down in the LA market.
Oh, well, there's fans here. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, we know. We hear from them. We raced at Paris Speedway a couple years ago, and there were fans that were not happy that that didn't return. So we're hoping to find a venue back in SoCal that we can return to the market here soon.
Now, what's cool about flat track to me is it goes back to the very beginnings of American motorcycling. When I think about it in the early days, I get an image in my head of guys cutting a track out of farmland, and just going round and round, having a lot of fun, on those early Harleys. And the customization of the bikes happened almost right away to get what they needed.
Yes, and you got to, the way I look at it, you got to figure that as soon as Harley Davidson made a motorcycle and Indian made a motorcycle, two guys hopped on those bikes and they went racing, and that's when flat track was born. So it's really, the history of the sport is intertwined all the way to the beginnings of motorcycling, and it's got roots that originated with the board track racers. The daredevils of the turn of the century. And then the sport started to get formalized in the 20s and 30s. Class A, which was prototype racing, was born in 1932. And coming out of the other side of the Great Depression, the fields were smaller. There were some challenges, obviously, with financial investment in using motorsports as a marketing platform. And so the OEMs were struggling, and that's when Class C racing was created in 1939. And that's really what our roots tie all the way back to. Class C racing is production-based motorcycle racing. So what we have today is kind of a combination of Class A, which is the prototype racing. Indian has built a beautiful prototype, purpose-built flat track machine called the Indian FTR 750. It's a work of art, and it's hands down the class of the field at the moment. Harley Davidson has a production-based platform that is more akin to the Class C era. And so taking that production-based platform, you could buy the engine from a Harley Davidson dealer and build it into a race machine and bring it to the racetrack. So they're really two different philosophies that are melding together in the sport today.
And Gene, that's the XG 750R, right?
That's the Harley Davidson XG 750R, yes.
Yeah, very cool bike. So let's give people an idea of flat tracking itself. We're talking about on the dirt. There's like no grip. These guys are sliding all over the place, but it's basically a controlled slide at high speed, right?
Yeah, so the best way I can describe the sport, if you were to boil it down, would be Harley Davidson's racing on horse tracks. If you take a motorcycle on dirt and you want to navigate it around a horse track, you've got to find a way to get around that corner sliding the entire way. And the method that the athletes use to navigate those turns and to turn these lap times. By the way, the lap times are about 33 seconds for a 1 mile circuit around a dirt horse track. That averages 110, 120 miles an hour. Peak speeds are about 140 miles an hour. That's fast. That's fast on asphalt, let alone dirt. And so the method that these guys use is that they kick the bike over and they spin that tire up, and they take their left leg, they hang it off the bike. They've got a steel shoe on the bottom of their boot, and they drag their foot and they navigate that turn at incredible speeds by modulating the throttle and sliding that motorcycle around each of the turns. And then as soon as they can get on the gas, they pin it and they haul down the straightaway. It is a spectacle to behold. Mile flat track racing is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen.
Yeah, they're doing like 90 through the corners, and it is incredibly athletic. I mean, I love your analogy to horse racing, because that, again, the tension in your muscles and really just pushing the whole time around that track, very, very athletic.
Yes, and it's funny, we go to some of these horse tracks for the first time. The Red Mile in Lexington, Kentucky is a good example. Beautiful clay 1 mile horse track right in downtown Lexington. And the customer that goes to that racetrack, they're used to seeing horses go around. And I don't know what the lap time for a horse going around that racetrack is, but I can tell you we go a lot faster and we make a lot more noise. And it is breathtaking to behold. It's pretty incredible how intense the competition is, and to see 18 bikes go ripping around a mile long horse track is a pretty cool thing to behold.
Absolutely, and they're in such a tight pack too. It's pretty rare to see somebody break away, right?
Well, yeah, it's pretty rare. We have had occasions where one athlete figures it out. He gets it dialed in better than everybody else, and is able to hit his marks. But for the most part, we have very competitive racing, very close racing. The drafting that you see at some of our races, it reminds you of a NASCAR race where you've got a pack of bikes that come off the corner, and there's a strategy around drafting. And so setting a guy up by being second in line or third in line, and then ducking out of that draft at the right time and getting an extra 10 miles an hour and pulling ahead of the pack, it is similar to a NASCAR race in many ways.
I love going to flat track racing, and the other thing too is it's right there. You're so close to the action, and it's like a sensory thing. You're smelling the exhaust. You hear the bikes roaring and the mud's slinging at you or the dirt slinging at you. It's a party.
Yes, and that's one of the things that we try to make sure that we keep in the events, keep it as a part of the events, because it's that visceral experience that you get when you go to a motorsport event. But it's also about the experience that we give the fans, the accessibility of our athletes. You're able to walk up and speak to some of these athletes in the heat of battle. If you've got a pit pass upgrade and you're able to get into the pits in the middle of the event and go get an autograph, go say hi. That kind of accessibility is rare these days. So the events are they're entertaining from beginning to end. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of local heroes among the riders, right? I mean, this is kind of a family thing, right?
It's very much a family thing. So there's pockets of flat track talent that have emerged over the years. The Midwest, the Illinois area, Michigan. There's a Michigan mafia of riders that come from there with a lot of history, and then there's a pocket in Pennsylvania and in California. So when we go to those areas of the country, the fans turn out in droves. Our factory Indian team is a husband and wife. I don't know if there's any other motorsport in the world that's got a husband and wife competing at the top levels of the sport on the same racetrack each weekend. I don't know what that bedtime routine would be like after a race, if one beats the other, or if it doesn't go the way they expect. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. This is the first year that Shayna Texter Bauman and Briar Bauman are racing on the same team in the same class. And then they each have a brother that compete in the sport. So you'll have the brother-in-law battle as well out there on the track throughout the year. So
that's great. Gene, we should probably talk a little bit about the classes, right? So you've got the AFT singles, which are like 450cc. These are the up-and-comers, the younger riders. And are they at a pro? Are they considered to be at a pro level at that point?
Yes, yeah. All three of our classes are pro level. These are the best athletes in the world at racing motorcycles on dirt. The base class is AFT singles, and it's a production 450cc dirt bike class. So if you are, a motocross rider and you wanted to try out flat track, all you got to do is swap your front suspension, put some 19-inch wheels on there, some different tires, and you can come flat track racing. So it's accessible. And so that class is often considered the entry class, but it stands on its own. It's a fierce battleground every weekend. We also have two classes of twin cylinder competition. So bikes like the Harley Davidson XG 750R and the Indian FTR 750, they compete in our premier class, in our Mission Super Twins class, and that's the division of the sport that has that continual legacy all the way going back to the 30s. The series was actually formalized into a championship in 1954. And so there is continuity in crowning a champion every year from 1954 to today.
So you got in terms of the twins, you got the production twins class and then the super twins class. What differentiates those?
The production twins class was created to provide a stepping stone for riders that were elevating out of the AFT singles class into twin cylinder competition. So going from a dirt bike, from a 450cc production based dirt bike to a highly modified production based twin cylinder motorcycle it can be a daunting task. And that's before you consider that they're racing against the top of the top, the Jared Mees of the world, who the multi-time champions and the guys that win, the lion's share of the races each year. So it can be a daunting task to go from that AFT singles division into that twins division. So we created the production twins category a few years ago to provide that stepping stone opportunity. And what we found is that in a way, we almost divide the talent. We divide the OEM support, and so we're working to combine those two categories into a single Mission Super Twins class for 2023. And so this year is a bit of an evolutionary year for us to bring those two classes back together.
Gene, I'm kind of interested in what you said earlier about the suspension differences in the AFT singles bikes versus like a traditional dirt bike. So we're talking about the travel of the front forks, right? You don't need as much travel on flat track. In fact, it would hurt you.
Before we dive into that, I should probably paint a picture of the different type of circuits that we race on. Flat track is very unique in that we've got the mile-long ovals that we talked about, which are horse tracks. We have half-mile speedway tracks, so what World of Outlaws races on. So there are half-mile dirt speedways all around the country for car racing. So that's another circuit type that we race on. We've got short tracks that we race on, which are quarter-mile. And they can have different kinds of compositions. It could be a cushion track. It could be a clay track. And so those are three types of oval racing where, you wouldn't want as much travel as a motocross suspension setup. But we also have a circuit type called TT, which is it stands for Tourist Trophy. It's got connections all the way back to, again, the early 20s when the first TT circuit was added into the sport with the Peoria TT. And that is a bit of a combination of an oval with a right-hander and a jump, and it's not a little jump; it's quite a big jump. So at the TT style events, it does take more of a motocross setup because these bikes are now getting launched into the air, flying pretty good distance and at a high speed. They're coming off of a turn, they're hitting a jump at 90 miles an hour, as opposed to in motocross, they're hitting a jump at 30 to 40 miles an hour. So that speed differential means that it's a whole different ball of wax when you're setting up a flat track bike suspension to be able to get launched into the air and still carry that speed when they land.
Off that jump, are they going into a straightaway after that?
So at the Peoria TT, it's quite a unique circuit, and I'll do my best to describe it. It's almost shaped like a peanut. And so they'll come out of the turns 1 and 2, and they'll be carrying a head of steam when they get into turn 1 on, once they get going. So they go around turns 1 and 2, and they approach a jump. And if you're standing at the bottom of the jump, it's taller. It's got to be 9 feet, 10 feet from the base of the jump, maybe more up to the top, and over a run of say 100 feet. And so when they launch off of that, they come from the outside, and they have to launch from the right side edge of the track as far to the right as they can and launch leaning over and turning, because when they land on the other side of that jump, they immediately go into a right-hander. So the fastest guys at the racetrack, and there's been a few over the years that master that track, and then they win consecutively 13 times in a row. Chris Carr is one example. Henry Wiles, another example of guys that dominate that track because they've figured out that jump. They figured out how to shoot from the right side of the track, launch into the air, pivot in midair, and set themselves up so that when they land, after traveling 90 feet, when they land, they're set up perfectly to fly into a right-hander and then have another left-hander after that.
Yeah, and the reason I asked about that is because I was just kind of wondering how technical it really gets on the TT, and it sounds like it's very technical, but once they dial it in, it's a sight to behold.
Yes, yeah, and you got to think that if there are races where the same guy wins 13 times in a row, and then when he stops racing, another guy wins 13 times in a row, there's got to be something about rider talent that is critical to this over machine talent, right? It's not just suspension setup. It's understanding how to set yourself up and go over that jump and land and carry that speed through a right-hander that would be daunting if you or I were riding a motorcycle without jumping, if we were just trying to navigate the course at low speed, let alone flying through the air and then setting yourself up for that right-hander. So that's a very interesting part of flat track. I've always found that part of the sport very interesting. There's not many dynasties of racing. Dale Earnhardt didn't win the Daytona 500 13 times in a row. And there's no other race that we have where there's been that kind of dominance on a mile year after year after year. So for two guys to do it, back to back over the span of a quarter century, again, I don't know if there's anything else in certainly in motorcycle racing, but I don't know if there's anything else in auto sport that's that has that kind of dominance from two individuals back to back like that.
I can't think of anything offhand. Someone will email me and say, "Oh yeah, what about this?" But no, but and also that the short track oval, Gene, that's a sprint, right? Like, so we're talking about a quarter mile or sometimes a little over a quarter mile, depending on the track you're at, right? But the sprints are very exciting.
Yes. So the short track racing is defined as between a quarter mile and a 3/8 mile. Chris Carr, who is a multi-time champion and legend in the sport, he used to describe it as to me as a fist fight in the phone booth. And that's a good way to describe it. It's a battle from it beginning to end. And that's one of the events where you have no idea who's going to win. You've got first-time winners at short tracks very often because it's anybody's race. It's a very physical circuit type to race on. There's a lot of bar banging. There's a lot of diving in the corners. So this year we've got the Laconia short track, which is at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And they've got a new surface that they put in. So that event... which is June 11th. That's going to be a fun one.
Now, Gene, half mile ovals, that's kind of the bread and butter, right? Because those tracks, they've been around for decades. That's the bread and butter of like the stock car world for many, many years. So that lends itself to motorcycle racing.
Yes, we're the benefactor there of the success of stock car racing. I don't know if there would have been justification to build half miles for flat track all around the country, but we can certainly race on those tracks. And they've got great amenities. They're great. It's a great fan experience. There's great lighting. There's concession stands and nice facilities. There's parking that's well lit. So we're able to bring the sport to new markets like I-70 Motorsports Park in Missouri and Cedar Lake Speedway in Wisconsin, Port Royal Speedway in Pennsylvania, tracks that are well known for car racing. We're able to bring the sport there and have a race ready facility.
And I'll tell you what, I've been to those little racetracks in the Midwest. On a summer night, there's nothing more fun than going to one of these little ovals, with your family and having a couple cold ones, just sitting back enjoying the racing.
Yeah, it's family-friendly entertainment, and it's a community, right? So a lot of these tracks, they've got weekly racing, and so it's every Friday night, every Saturday night. That's the entertainment, and they've got a built-in fan base. Once a year, we bring the motorcycle show to town, and it's in many ways, it's a completely different product to what they're used to. The car races, there's a lot of banging, right? There's a lot of bumping and banging. The motorcycle races are, American flat track races are intense. They are very close. And, the riders have raced with each other for, in some cases, decades. So they know how the guy next to him or the girl next to him is going to react. They know if they can dive in. And you'll see them make these, twitch movements to slow up the motorcycle and allow the other one to get by. And then that turns into drama after the fact where there's, some finger waving and some choice words that are said once they get off the racetrack. So it presents a different kind of racing for them where they can see the athlete as opposed to, in the car world, the drivers, behind a cage and not very visible. Our athletes are very visible. You see the emotion in their reactions in real time around the racetrack.
Yeah, and it's not just wheel to wheel; it's shoulder to shoulder and knee to knee. So, in terms of motorsport, I think it's as tight as it gets.
Yeah, it really is. Many of our races, the margin of victory is less than a tenth. We've had a few races where it's goose eggs, and they're we got to make the call using a line scanning camera that scans at 10,000 frames a second. It's some of the closest racing that you'll see in any form of motorsport. We use a timing system that's the same that IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One, MotoGP. We use that timing system because drafting to the line, we see GPS speeds of 140 plus, where guys are next to each other, crossing a stripe at the exact same moment. We need the timing system's got the same resolution again as NASCAR and Formula One because we have that same level of intense competition.
Has there been sort of a technological mountain to climb in getting everything set up?
We've really stabilized the competition elements of the sport. And we work hard to automate as much of that as possible and to, have electronic systems that take any kind of guesswork or any kind of, judgment call out of the equation. So now our focus in the technology side of the business is entirely around fan experience. So we've developed our own ticketing platform so we could control the customer experience from beginning to end. We don't just sell a ticket. We sell an experience.
How many laps are we talking about for each event?
Historically, the sport had 25 lap main events. We made a change a few years ago for two reasons. One was to provide a longer racing experience at a shorter track. So a 25 lap race at a mile is going to be a 12, 13 minute race. A 25 lap race at a quarter mile track is over before you can even blink. And we listened to the fans. We had some fans that were a little unhappy about some of our short track races because they felt like, a 3-minute race, what's the point?
Yeah, it's over before it started, right?
Yeah, and so we listened to the fans, and we also wanted to set ourselves up for a more broadcast-friendly format, and we moved to a timed race plus 2 laps. So now we've got, a 10-minute race at some venues, so it's 10 minutes plus 2 laps, and that last 2 laps is a shootout. And so it added a strategy element to the race as well. Guys will bide their time, watch how the guy in front of them is navigating the corners, navigating the straights, so that he can then set that guy up when there's 2 laps left.
That's called a showdown, my friend.
That's right.
I love it. And then you mentioned you kind of retooled for TV viewers, and now you got a new partnership with Fox, right?
Yes. Yep. We just announced a new partnership with Fox Sports, and all of our races are going to premiere on FS1 this year. We're very excited about that, and we'll also have re-airs on FS2. So it gives fans multiple opportunities to catch the action on the Fox Sports networks. Yeah, and also that gives so much more exposure to the riders, right? I mean, that means a whole lot to their careers. Yes, and it really does, and it presents a platform for them to generate sponsorship revenue. The broadcasts are expected to generate a couple 100,000 viewers each. And so having an opportunity to get your team sponsors, your rider sponsors, in front of a couple 100,000 of America's sports and motorcycle enthusiasts each week is going to be a good platform for them to be able to go out and generate the money that they need to, invest in their teams, invest in their infrastructure, and grow with us. And by the way, at the end of the day, motorsport is a business. It has to be, right? There's no two ways about it. And sponsorship is so important. Obviously, the pandemic had challenges for every business, and including the motorsport business. And how did you guys weather that? That must have been pretty tenuous at times. Yes, yeah, it was. When the pandemic hit, we were contracted to do 18 TV shows. We had sponsorship deals tied to all 18 of those shows, and we had to find a way to get those shows on air. And so what we did is move to a doubleheader format. We found 9 markets that we could go to, and we did doubleheaders. And it worked. We were able to get 2 TV shows out of each weekend. We were able to fulfill our commitment to our television partner and our sponsors. And we were actually able to add a title sponsor in July of 2020. I think we were the only sport adding sponsorship or signing sponsorship deals in the middle of 2020. Progressive joined as our title sponsor, and they've been a great partner over the last few years. And we're actually really excited about a new expansion of that partnership, and the fans will benefit from it. Progressive is going to help us bring fan engagement and fan experience to the events. We haven't announced it yet, but we're going to have the Progressive AFT Marketplace powered by Honda as a welcome area. So when fans get to the track, they'll have an entertainment centerpiece there, where we'll have a band, we'll have activations, we'll have food vendors and concessions, we'll have merchandise. We'll have sponsors that are giving out swag. And so we're very appreciative of Progressive's signing on during the pandemic, and certainly in continuing to invest in the sport and the fan experience now. That's smart. I mean, they got in at a time when others maybe didn't want to take a risk. Yeah, it was an interesting time, I think, for all of motorsports and for all of sports. We had to learn to navigate the local environments in each of the markets that we went to, and each of them were different.
I'm really interested to hear about the road to the championship, right? Because you've got all these events, and your calendar runs March to October, right? So it's a long road.
We kick off the season at Daytona's Bike Week, March 10th and 11th. It's a doubleheader, 2 chances to win points. Kicking off at Bike Week, everybody shows up and they're lean and mean. They've been training all winter. They're cut and fit, and they're ready to race. Going from March 10th to October 15th, it's a long haul. There's a total of 18 races over 15 weekends, all over the country, starting in Daytona, but hitting the other corner of the coast up in Castle Rock, Washington. So we cover the whole country throughout the March to October stretch, and there's a lot of strategy involved. Some guys are better on miles, some guys are better on half miles, some guys are better on short tracks. And so the points battle almost always comes down to the end. You never know who's going to win the championship until we get to that final race in October.
And to score points, you have to finish 1, 2, or 3?
So the way that our events are structured, you've got, say, 30 guys and gals that come to the racetrack in each of the classes. And we have to narrow that field down to the top 16 riders that night. And so we have a practice and qualifying, timed qualifying similar to other motorsports. And then we go through a series of semi-races in order to qualify that field down to the top 16 athletes on the night. We have a point scale that then is paid out to those 16 riders that make that main event at the end of the night. It's 25 points to win. It's 1 point if you're in last place. And again, in the way our races work, there's no guarantee. There's no shoe-in winner each and every weekend. So it creates quite a bit of drama throughout the year, as some guys don't make it to the main. You might get there and then you leave with no points.
So basically, they're racing in heats, right?
Yep. And so we call them semis.
Okay, right. And
as opposed to the reason that the distinction there is, if you've got heats, you're talking about let's say 3 layers. You got heat races that go to semis that go to a main. We just have semis to a main. So it's a more concise entertainment package. It's a 3-hour window from opening ceremonies until the last checkered flag flies. And you've got, a number of short format semi races that set that field for the main. And then, 10 to 15 minute main events for each of the classes to bring it all home.
All right. So once again, season opener kicks off March 10th and 11th.
That's correct. The 69th running of America's Original Extreme Sport Championship, Thursday, March 10th and Friday, March 11th at Volusia Speedway Park. It's the Volusia Half Mile is what the event's called, and tickets are on sale now at www.americanflattrack.com. Once new fans see the sport, they're hooked for life. And we would invite everybody, all your listeners, to come out and check out the AFT experience.
Fantastic. And I'll put links in the show notes. Gene Crouch from American Flat Track Racing, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Maurice. We'll have to get you out to a race sometime.
I would love that.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast app. And you can visit buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and chip a couple bucks in the gas tank. I'll see you back here on Wednesday, March 16th with a new story from the annals of automotive history. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.